To me, the mistake is companies aren't thinking like what I've just laid out. And by the way, what I'm saying is not all that hard to do. It's common sense that sometimes it's not so common. But I have the 6-step culture process that number one is you have to define what the customer experience is. So it's not so much about the whole culture, it's about how customer service and experience fits into the culture. Frontier Airlines, they have been struggling, I believe. One of the things they did about 2 years or so ago was they chose to eliminate all human-to-human customer support. They believe in their numbers. That's another mistake. NPS, Net Promoter Score, is one of my favorite measurements, but it can also become a vanity measurement, meaning people know, okay, let's see how many 9s and 10s we can get. Well, you know what? That's really nice to know and nice to have, but what's really driving that? Oftentimes, people will give you ratings, and you're in the survey business, you know how this works. We have to be very, very specific about how we go about understanding what our customers want. The voice of the customer programs, the listening programs that we do are so powerful if they're done the right way. Some companies, however, unfortunately, are only looking at certain pieces of data that make them feel good. In other words, they think they're doing a great job because there's one metric that makes them look like they do so. But if they really dug deep and they talked to customers at any more than just that surface level, they would find that there's a disconnect between what they think is actually happening and what is actually happening.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Xperience Beyond Podcast. In today's podcast, we are addressing a very critical challenge faced by even the most admired companies. What happens when a strong brand reputation is let down by a weak customer experience? The theme for today's podcast is the fall from grace. What happens when experience fails reputation? I'm your host, Anand Nigam, co-founder and director of XEBO.ai. And today I am joined by someone who needs no introduction in the world of customer experience. There's hardly anyone in the CX space who hasn't heard of Shep Hyken. He is one of the most respected and recognized voices in the industry, a true legend whose influence spans decades. Shep is a New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, the Chief Amazement Officer at Shepherd Presentations, and a Hall of Fame speaker celebrated for his high-energy, high-impact insights. Since founding his company in 1983, Shep has worked with hundreds of organizations from Fortune 100 giants like Amazon, American Express, AT&T, to nimble startups, helping them build loyal relationships with both customers and employees. He is the author of several classics, including The Cult of the Customer, The Amazement Revolution, The Convenience Revolution, and I Will Be Back. He also created The Customer Focus, a training program that helps businesses create a customer-centric culture. In today's episode, Shep and I unpack why great brands lose ground when they ignore customer service, how trust is earned and also lost in moments when most companies overlook, and what leaders can do right now to protect reputation through proactive experience design. Whether you are leading a team, running a business, or just passionate about creating moments that matter, this conversation will challenge and inspire you. So welcome, Shep, to the Xperience Beyond Podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Boy, that was an amazing introduction. I think I wrote that. that was my bio. Thank you for sharing that with everybody.
You have an amazing bio, Shep, and it'll be great to have your experience in this podcast, share your experience with the audience of this podcast. And the topic like we chose, which is very important for many of the leaders and many of the brands, because this is the biggest struggle that they are going through. A bad reputation and suddenly a bad customer experience leads to a massive impact on their reputation, which they have built over the years. So in your experience, what are the most common missteps that lead established brands to erode their hard-earned reputation through poor customer experience?
Wow. So great question. There's so many different answers that I can give you based on, the type of business and industry, but let's take a look at several things. Number one, it's not built into the culture. If you want to create the right experience, you need to focus on the culture. I just read a very interesting article that talked about how some leaders go, this is the year of the customer, which basically said everything up until this year was not the year of the customer. I know I'm paraphrasing, and I think to myself, wow, that's so true. How many times have I walked in to an event where they're theming it all about customer service, and next year it's a completely different thing? Or maybe have a client that calls and says, we have a problem. Can you do a speech and fix this for us? And it doesn't work that way. So number one, build it into the culture. Number two, you need to hire the right people that are going to be on the bus that you want them to be on. Everybody needs to be in alignment and heading in the right direction. And once you get these good people, train them on what works and what they should be doing. Because even if you onboard them and give them, the background of what you're all about and the skills that you want them to exhibit and the attitude you want them to have, training isn't something you did, it's something you do. So it needs to be ongoing. It constantly needs to be reinforced. So to me, the mistake is companies aren't thinking like what I've just laid out. And by the way, what I'm saying is not all that hard to do. It's common sense that sometimes is not so common.
Absolutely. And I think culture is a very important point. I read somewhere that culture eats strategy in breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Somewhere, I don't know where did I read that, but
I think you have to have a good strategy of building a culture too. So I don't know, but you're right. It was like, that's just one of the famous sayings that are bantered around that, folks, the legends have said. There's and I'll just do this real quickly. I'll try to spend about a minute or so on it, but I have the 6-step culture process that number one is you have to define what the customer experience is. So it's not so much about the whole culture, it's about how customer service and experience fits into the culture. I walk into companies and I ask to look at their mission, vision, value statements, and oftentimes I find that exact definition that we're looking for, something very close to it, already built into it. So let's pull it out and let's create a statement that defines what it is that you're all about. My favorite is the Ritz-Carlton that states, we're ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Number two, it must be communicated. Again, not a theme of the year, it is the theme that's ongoing and it's all the time. Number three, you train everybody to it. We just mentioned that a moment ago. Training isn't something you did, it's something you do, so it's ongoing. Number four, leaders, managers, supervisors, anybody that has people reporting to them must be the demonstrators of these behaviors. You treat, if you're going to treat your employees one way, you're going to have to expect they're going to treat others, especially customers, the same way. So keep that in mind. Demonstrate the behavior. Number five is to make sure everybody stays in alignment, defend the culture. And number six is to celebrate it when it works. People should know, hey, we're doing a great job. Let's just let everyone know and be happy about it. Delight in it, if you will.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing these 6 pillars of developing and keeping a culture within the organization. Thank you. Again, coming back to the topic which is most critical to many of the companies, which is small mistake in managing customer experience can lead to a big impact on the reputation that they have built over a period of time. Have you come across some examples, Shep, which you have seen, I'm sure, because you have worked in this industry for so long? It'd be great if you can share some examples with our audience on what has happened, gone wrong, and yeah.
So I never talk poorly of a company. So that's just the thing I've chosen to always stay to never saying anything bad. But I'll tell you where the companies make mistakes. And by the way, there's some companies that are actually pretty good, and they've made mistakes and then they've come back. Without mentioning specific companies, back in the 1980s, there was a book written by a gentleman named Tom Peters called In Search of Excellence. And in the book, I can't remember exactly how many companies were represented as excellent companies, but I'll give you an example. Delta Airlines was one of those excellent companies. Well, the entire airline industry fell from grace, Delta included. But it's really interesting how Delta has come back and they're now recognized as one of the top airlines. And by the way, I fly Delta. I usually fly American Airlines. They treat me very, very well. But it's interesting to see how some company, and it's very hard to stay at the top, right? So some companies have been able to do that. Other companies struggle. Some come back. Some make decisions that end up hurting them long term with reputation. And I'll give you an example of one. And by the way, I admire this company, Frontier Airlines. They have been struggling, I believe. One of the things they did about 2 years or so ago was they chose to eliminate all human-to-human customer support. I thought that was a bold move. I wasn't sure if it was going to work. It didn't really work. I think companies are still focused on trying to do that. But I think the companies that make big decisions like that are to be admired, even if those big decisions don't turn out to be exactly the way they want them to. It does actually pave the way for the future for that company as others as they figure out how to navigate back to what it is that they want, even if it didn't work out immediately. Now, I know I'm kind of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I think that's where companies make the mistake. They also believe in their numbers. That's another mistake. NPS, Net Promoter Score, is one of my favorite measurements, but it can also become a vanity measurement, meaning people know, okay, let's see how many 9s and 10s we can get. Well, you know what? That's really nice to know and nice to have, but what's really driving that? Oftentimes, people will give you ratings, and you're in the survey business. You know how this works. We have to be very, very specific about how we go about understanding what our customers want. The voice of the customer programs, the listening programs that we do are so powerful if they're done the right way. Some companies, however, unfortunately, are only looking at certain pieces of data that make them feel good. In other words, they think they're doing a great job because there's one metric that makes them look like they do so. But if they really dug deep and they talked to customers at any more than just that surface level, they would find that there's a disconnect between what they think is actually happening and what is actually happening.
Shep, in your experience, you must have also come across, many examples where companies, they fail to see very small, minor details, which lead to loss of brand's reputation. I mean, what could be those minor details that you have observed companies failing to recognize?
I call these confidence creation ideas. What are you doing to ensure that your customer has confidence in you? Confidence leads to trust. Trust is an emotion. That is an emotion that's tied to a customer deciding whether they want to come back and ultimately become loyal. So as soon as you do not do what is promised, and that promise can be a statement you have on your website, or it could be an employee saying, I'm going to call you back tomorrow, and then they don't do it. So confidence comes from all of the things that our parents taught us when we were young. Be polite, say please, say thank you, do what you say you're going to do. Don't blame others when there's problems. Take responsibility. So that's a very general statement. The other thing we notice is that while companies do say, yeah, let us know when there's a problem, we'll fix it, they don't go about fixing it the right way. They try to bring things back to even, which isn't the best way to go about it. The goal is to restore confidence to a higher level than if the problem hadn't, than they had before the problem happened. So one thing companies fail to often do is act with urgency. Urgency creates confidence with that customer. So it's not if something's ever going to go wrong, it's when something is going to go wrong. And how a company responds to that situation is what makes the customer realize, you know what? I like the way they did that. If that's the way they always handle things, I'm going to be happy doing business with them. I just wrote about the customer service paradox, which has been around a long time, which is essentially a statement that says that having a problem and fixing it often creates a better experience than if there was no problem. And which makes me think, well, do we want to purposely cause problems to show how good we really are? No, we don't want to do that. Nobody wants that. But the confidence that a customer has when they know, and by the way, I could be doing business with a company for 10 transactions or interactions, nothing's ever going wrong. But if on number 4 or 5 something does go wrong and they fix it and they make it right, and I still have 10 interactions with them, I'm going to have a higher confidence level than never having a problem at all. So we recognize all these things. And again, you know the stats and the facts and the findings. The one other thing I want to mention is that mediocrity, I call these moments of mediocrity. They're average, they're satisfactory. Nobody's going to complain if nothing was bad, but they're not going to be elated because nothing was really that good anyway. So in our annual research, we have a question that essentially on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is bad and 5 is great, 3 is average or satisfactory. If you were to rate that company average or satisfactory, what's the likelihood that you would come back and do business with them again? And essentially it's 1 in 4 of these satisfied customers aren't coming back. It's actually 27%, because all you are is just okay. So if you want to be better than okay, which is not hard to do, you're going to find that you end up retaining and you see less churn as a result.
I picked up 2 very important messages here. One, it's not just about acting on feedback, it's acting with urgency. And your emphasis on urgency was important there. And second one, you said that it's not just managing the hygiene factors, because if you are just being an average company managing the hygiene factors, even happy customers are likely to go away one day. So you need to create those moments of delight. You have to be beyond average to retain customers.
Awesome. But how much more of beyond average do you really have to be? So I asked the specific question because I've said for years, if you want to be amazing, you have to be just a little bit better than average. Once in a while, you'll have opportunities to go above and beyond when a customer calls you with a problem or an issue and they're trying to get that resolved, and you step up and you do something out of the ordinary. But you don't want to wait for rainy days to be great. You need to be great all the time. Now, great doesn't mean, again, above and beyond. Great means just consistently and predictably meeting that customer's expectations. When they refer to you and say things like, I love doing business with them because they always are so knowledgeable when I have questions. They're always friendly and welcoming. Whenever, knowledge, friendliness, very, very important on the, scale of what our customers want. Even when there's a problem, I know I can always count on them. They always get back to me quickly. When that word always is in front of something that's expected, you're operating at that zone of amazement. And oftentimes, everything I just mentioned is just a basic expectation. So the companies that can be consistent with that, they win. Now, being better than average specifically, I asked Horst Schulze, the first president and co-founder of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Group, and this is what he said. You only have to be 10% better, just a little bit better. I go, 10% better? You actually put a number to it. He goes, yeah. I go, tell me what that looks like in real life. He goes, just use the guest's name. When they walk into the hotel, they have luggage. Oftentimes there's a luggage tag. The person working the door looks at the luggage tag and says, are you Mr. Hyken? Yes, Mr. Hyken, welcome to the Ritz-Carlton. They walk me to the front desk and they say, Mr. Hyken is here to check in. So they're using my name. I later on, I come down and where's the restroom? And they say, well, let me show you where. And they take you down the hall and they point to they don't walk in the restroom with you, of course, but they get you close enough. And it's those little touches that make a difference. And that's why I believe you don't have to go above and beyond. Just do the little things and figure out what those little things are. Are you familiar with a gentleman named Will Guidara?
No, I haven't. Yeah.
You should have him on your show. There's lots of great books that have been written about hospitality. His is called Unreasonable Hospitality. I've seen his speech a number of times, and I saw it not that long ago, and it reminded me of why it works so well, why he became the #1 rated restaurant in the world. Every company should do this exercise. Take a look at your touch points, journey map, in other words, and look at every one of these touch points and say, is the touch point maximized for the opportunity to give the best experience to that customer? By the way, touch points are up here. This is what the customer experience is. Below the touch point are impact points. This is what happens behind the scenes, the processes and employees that drive that touch point. And I'll give you an example. One of the early books I read by Jan Carlson, former president of Scandinavian Airlines, he took the airline, you make a reservation. Back then, you picked up the phone and made a phone call. That was a main touch point. How is that reservation handled? Then you got to the airport on the day of departure and you checked your bags at the curb. Another interaction, you're checking at the ticket counter. So all of these are main interactions. Well, what Will Gadara did is he took every possible interaction that could happen at a restaurant and he said, how can I make this better? Now, one of the worst moments at a restaurant is at the end of the meal, of a nice meal, and the server brings you your check. And now you have to pay for this. It's really expected, so it's not a bad moment, but it's a moment that, like, wow, what a letdown after having this incredible meal in his restaurant to present them with a bill for a very expensive price. So he took that moment, I'm not going to give you all the details, and he figured out a way to make that moment special so that people remember what happened when they got the bill, not that they received the bill. So anyway, take a look at every touch point and find ways to maximize the opportunity to create the best impact you can have with your customers.
Thank you for sharing this awesome example. It's very useful. We also, when we started our conversation, we were talking about two focus areas which actually impact the reputation. And you said culture and the employees. And just now you also said that employees are a big impact point for the channels when they are looking at them. So what role, according to you or in your experience, does employee experience play in maintaining the brand's reputation? How can neglecting it lead to service failures?
You are singing my song. And I have been since the 1980s when I started my business. I recognized the need for internal customer service, treating the people you work with. And I kind of mentioned this when I talked about those 6 steps. I said leaders, managers, supervisors, anybody that has people that report to them need to recognize that they're role models and demonstrate the behaviors. This is the employee experience, the internal experience. Create the experience that you want your customers to experience as well. In several of my books, I mentioned Herb Kelleher, the founder of Southwest Airlines here in the US. And he was asked a question, he called it a conundrum. Like, I'm not sure how to answer this, but let me take a guess. He was asked, what's more important, the passengers of this airline, the employees of the airline, or the stakeholders, the stockholders, the people that are investing in, and are they the most important? Are they the ones you want to please? And he thought about it and he said, this is what I think works. If you treat your employees the right way, they're going to turn around and they're going to treat the customer, or in his case, the passenger, the right way. If you do that, then the passenger is going to want to come back and fly on you again and again. And guess what? That's going to make those stakeholders really happy. So it's not really a conundrum at all. And I think it's a great, simple story to illustrate the point. We need to treat the people the right way. We need to demonstrate the behaviors. We need to create the experience that makes them want to stay. So I wrote in one of my books, The Amazement Revolution, I talked to a number of people, interviewed them, and I also did some research. One of the companies was a company, a health system in Southern Florida called Baptist Health South. Recently, Brian Keeley just retired within, I believe, in the last year or so. But he had an idea of creating something called destination employment. Create an experience when somebody comes to work for you that they never want to leave your business. Just as you want customers to always come back, you want your employees to do the same thing. So I came up with this idea that working at a company should be fun. Not fun like let's have a party, but fun is an acronym, F-U-N. So F stands for fulfillment. Is the job a fulfilling experience for that employee? U stands for uniqueness. Is there something that employee does that's unique? Maybe they're the only one that speaks a specific language. So you can use that and ask them to help in a particular situation if that comes about. So exploit them for whatever uniqueness they have. And N is for next. What do you do that's next? What's the next thing that's going to get your employees to be excited about what you do? Is it a new project? Is it a new initiative? Or maybe you're just so great to work for, they're excited about coming back the next day or the next week. So fun, create that experience that makes people want to stay and never leave. And guess what happens? Brian Keeley said it. They'll engage better with the customer. In his case, those are patients and family members of the patients and internal customers as well, the nurses, the doctors, and the team members that are in that hospital. Everybody engages better when they're totally fulfilled in the job that they have.
Very nicely put and explained, Shep. Thank you. Shep, now we are living in a digital era, social era, I would say that socially, digitally. How
Yes.
can a negative experience in this context get escalated to a very broader reputational crisis for a brand?
Yeah. So once something goes social, and by the way, there's social customer care, which means customers will go online and ask the companies they do business with for help because they have a problem or maybe they have a complaint. And if it's legitimate, that's the first channel they go to. Well, then it's just the same as them picking up the phone and calling you. This is just their preferred method. By the way, that is the least preferred method of all channels of communication. So I had a client that said to me, we're going to focus and spend millions of dollars on social customer care because we see a lot of our customers are going there. And what we learned with a little bit more digging, and I told him to check into this, and he thanked me for saving him millions of dollars, was that many of those customers are going there because they can't get help anywhere else. So they're going to review sites. They're going straight on Facebook and Instagram, and they're sharing their stories that aren't positive. So I believe every time, and I know this is something that your company does, social listening. Every response, comment that's made online by a customer needs to be addressed. When I say every, that includes the good, because you might as well say thank you. And there's plenty of ways to even use AI to do a quick little thank you and somewhat personalize that message so they're not always the same. But when it's a negative response, and you and I talked briefly before we started the interview, you met Jay Bear and talked with Jay Bear. Jay Bear refers to a negative comment on social media as a what do you call it? It's like a spectator sport. I love that. People from all over the world now can watch how this company is going to handle it, right? So I love that idea because it's so true. When you see a negative comment, you need to see how is that company going to handle it. So two things. Number one, respond to it. And in this case, you need to respond urgently, as quickly as possible. Number two, pull that complaint offline. Resolve the complaint, and then come back online and thank the customer for taking the time to work with you directly. And we're so glad we're able to take care of you. And in the perfect world, that customer then comes back and says something in return. I'll tell you how powerful this is. There was a jewelry store that had hundreds of positive 5-star reviews, right? Also had probably a dozen 1-star reviews. Scathing reviews. Now, if you read these reviews, there is absolutely no way that you would want to do business with this jewelry store. But guess what was right underneath the comment that the customer made? The reaction that the jewelry store had to that customer. And then so many of those customers came back and said, I am so sorry I said what I said. I wish I'd have reached out to you directly in the first place, et cetera, et cetera. And guess what? Those negative reviews turn into positive credibility that customers saw. This is how this company handles a problem. I want to do business with that. Northwestern University did a study a few years back that a perfect 5-star rating is actually, customers have skepticism over that. They said, I believe a 4.2 to a 4.5 is like the perfect sweet spot for credibility on what great ratings are. So there you go.
That's an awesome example of turning around the negative reviews. Absolutely. And each and every negative review is important, which means from the social media perspective.
Yeah. And you treat it the same way you would if the customer came to you straight away. I love doing things in steps. Number one, acknowledge the complaint. If you're doing it socially, you're acknowledging it by writing. Number two, say you're sorry. Very important. By the way, you can say you're sorry first if you want and then acknowledge. It doesn't matter. But number three is, here's what we're going to do to solve the problem. I'd like to reach out to you directly, or if you're interacting with them directly, let's talk about what we're going to do. Number 4 is you take ownership for it. It may not be your fault, but it is your opportunity at this moment to take care of that customer. And when we're talking with customer support people, we try to, when I'm working on training with them, we are always reminding them that you are never the fault of the reason the customer is contacting you. You're the answer to how it's going to be taken care of. So feel really good about that. They're going to be angry. They're going to be mad, but it's not at you. Anyway, so you take ownership. And number 5, we talked about this earlier, you do it with urgency.
Awesome. Shep, can I take another 5 minutes?
Sure. Let's see. We are good for about another, how about 5 minutes? And yeah, I would love to do that.
So my last question is more around how the brands can be more proactive. What kind of proactive strategies can brands implement to detect and address these early signs of customer dissatisfaction before it actually affects their reputation?
Right. So we already know, we've talked about listening, intently listening. So be very intentional about the programs that you create that give you the feedback that you want. And social listening allows you to get direct feedback. Number 2, I want you to take a look at your surveys. What are you doing to learn what the customer's thinking? But here's a big one. When's the last time a leader, an executive that you know of, has actually gone to the front line and experienced what's going on? When's the last time they went out and, for lack of a better term, mystery shopped their own company? We need to make sure executives and leaders understand what customers are experiencing. It was back in the 1980s when I wrote my first book, Moments of Magic. And in that book, I talked about a company, Anheuser-Busch, the beer company, and how it was required that once a quarter, leadership, anybody with a certain title or higher, had to spend a day in the field driving around with a salesperson, meeting customers, and understanding what that salesperson's doing and how customers are reacting to that. In my most recent book, I'll Be Back, How to Get Customers to Come Back Again and Again, I talked about a gentleman that founded a company, Microsoft, Bill Gates, and he went down to the product support center, that's what he called it at the time, and he strapped on a headset around his ears, and he answered the phone, Microsoft product support, this is William, how can I help you? And this was his way of learning the problems and issues and the comments that customers were making about his company. So Jeff Bezos, and again, I just wrote another article about this. There was a point in time where the data was saying calls were coming in and being answered within, this is early in the game with them at Amazon, were being answered within 60 seconds. And he just didn't believe it. So he picked up the phone in front of all of his leadership. They were in a meeting and he called customer support and it took 10 minutes. Can you imagine what all of those people were feeling at that moment? But I think it sends a really good statement for a leader to spend the time on the front line, interacting, shadowing people, learning firsthand what customers are saying. And they shouldn't be private about it. They should make sure the entire company knows this is what leadership does, because that way they can be right in tune and in sync with what customers are experiencing. So that's, I think, a couple of comments or powerful ways to deal with that.
I'm so glad I'm familiar with these two names, Bill Gates and Jeff.
Yeah.
Many of our audiences
just throw those names around,
No, but it's great example from leadership's involvement perspective, and it sets great goals for the other employees to replicate. So fantastic examples. This brings us to the end of our key section, Shep. I've got 5 rapid fire questions. If you're okay.
Okay.
Can I start? Coffee or tea? How would you start your day with?
Coffee. Iced coffee.
Iced coffee. If you had to sum up amazing service in one word, what would it be?
Consistency.
What's one brand you think is nailing customers' experience right now?
Amazon.
Awesome. What's worse, long wait times or robotic service?
Wait, say that again. Long wait times or horrific service?
Robotic service.
Or robotic service. Long wait times.
One customer service phrase you wish people would stop saying.
That's our policy. Anything that has the word policy in it.
And finally, what was the first CX lesson that you ever learned, whether it was in your early career or in your magic show days?
My magic show days. Say thank you. Thank your customers.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shep, for that insightful conversation. What a fantastic conversation and insights that you have been able to share with our audience today. From brand trust to silent churn, you have reminded us that no reputation is strong enough to survive a broken experience.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. So if this episode gave my audience something to think about, I will request them to subscribe to the Xperience Beyond podcast. I am Anand Nigam. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, consistency builds trust and experience builds legacy. See you next time.